There was a Zen master walking with one of his disciples out in the country, and they sat down under a tree, and the disciple didn't quite get it yet, what Zen is. He'd only been there for 6 years. So the master was sitting there just being, watching, listening, and the disciple was thinking. And then he said, "Master, I've been thinking, how do I enter Zen?" The question means, how do I enter the state of consciousness that is Zen? And there was a long silence before the master said anything. And then the master raised his finger and said, "Can you hear the sound of that mountain stream?" And the disciple said, he at first couldn't hear anything, and then, "Yes, I can hear it." Suddenly he heard the distant mountain stream, and Master said, "Enter Zen from there." Oh, okay. And for just a little while the disciple was there, attentive, alert, listening. And then, a few minutes later, the face of the disciple changed again from the openness to, "Master, I've been thinking, now what if I had said, 'No, I can't hear the mountain stream'? What would you have said then?" And the master raised his finger again and said, "Disciple, yes, enter Zen from there." So the mountain stream is beautiful. More beautiful and deeper is the state of consciousness. If he hadn't heard the mountain stream, it would have been the same. He would have been in the state of alert attention and might have said, "I can hear nothing." And the master says, "Enter Zen from there." So here, I take this as a little signpost, teaching story, for you also to work with sound here, because there are beautiful sounds here in this place. And to be attentive to the sounds that you hear today. Particularly good opportunity to be attentive to the many subtle sounds that you hear here. Many sounds that are beautiful and subtle. To hear them requires a certain degree of alertness. That's why Zen masters often raise their finger. That symbolizes not, "I'm telling you, you better believe me." No, not that. It says, be alert, awake. So that the state is required. So when you listen to a sound, you place a field of attention that is actually more important than the sound, no matter how beautiful the sound is. But the sound can draw your attention out. And then you learn to not just hear the sound and then immediately label it and then are done with it, but stay a while and remain attentive to that sound, or it might be a sequence of sound. be attentive and remain there, and let the sound be there. And then you have what we mentioned this morning, where you have the sense perception, the visual sense perception happens against the background of stillness. And now also the auditory sense perception happens also in the field of stillness, or against the background of stillness. So to every sense perception there is a background. We could also call it the ground. In ordinary consciousness, humans are not aware of the ground, which is awareness. The background, the entire substratum, to use a term from geology. So as you listen to the sound, which is in the foreground of your consciousness, you're also aware of the background. And the background is very hard to describe in any way because it is not something. The sound is something. And as it is something, it is born and eventually it dies. The background is not born and dies. It's always there, unchanging. So you are lost in a surface world of external appearances and things when you do not know that dimension, the background dimension, that could also be called the unmanifested. But I'm using a somewhat different pointer. Some pointers can be more helpful to certain people. So there is the background, and to see that as you sit, stand, lie, you listen, there's the sound. Do I have a bell here? It dissolved. I wanted to demonstrate how a sound comes into being and then goes out of existence, slowly fades out. But we have something even better, the entire bell has faded out of existence. So to be aware of that is amazing. One can also call it a field of peace that underlies your perceptions. A background peace. And imagine having that background peace in human interactions. How that changes everything between human beings. Let's put that aside for a moment and stay with just the sounds. It's a little easier. Humans are complicated. And you will notice that when you fall back into the dream state of being identified with the stream of thinking, all the subtle sounds around you, you don't even notice, you don't hear them. Your attention is elsewhere. Your attention, your consciousness, is being absorbed by thought continuously. There isn't much left for anything else. There isn't also much left for creativity or anything new to come in. It's all repetitive. And so here you are making space inside you. There's no other way for something truly new to arise in your life, something truly that comes out of the freshness of the unmanifested, the freshness of being itself, and takes on form, a thought, a word, an action, some creation, perhaps a work of art, a work of this or that, or simply a way of being with others that has a different quality than the normal way of being with others. So that's the only way something truly new can come in, because no matter how your life changes on the surface, it's not a true change. You could, if your bank account is empty now and you win $10 million, on the external level things will change, but that's not very much. The same set of problems that you have now, or very similar one, will arise again. The fear of not enough is not going to go away, perhaps for a few weeks. And again, it might become magnified because you have a bigger scenario for you to play out your drama. And if you're rich and famous, then they can write about you and your drama. That's all, and it looks bigger, but it's just like everybody else's. It's just when the drama is played out between the two famous actors in a mansion, it looks interesting. It's not interesting at all. It's the same drama that happens everywhere else. There's nothing new, it's repetitive. And then they get a divorce and marry somebody else and it starts again. So for something truly new to arise, you need to find, not create as such, because it's already there. You need to find, one could say, that dimension of space. One could say you have to make space. Yes. In one way, that's the space already wants to come through, the spatial consciousness. In another, one could say it requires your cooperation. You have to make room. Then it's a beautiful, more harmonious emergence. If it pushes, it wants to come through, and there's a heavy egoic structure, it may still come through, but it has to create havoc in your life first, because the shell has to break. And then you're struck by some disaster that breaks the shell of ego, whatever it may be. And so there are people here who have already experienced some kind of disaster in their lives, some great loss, where their life is threatened or where everything collapsed, and something began to come through that. Otherwise, there was no space there, because there was all the mind objects that one had identified with as oneself, covering up the vastness, the infinite possibilities, the infinite potential that is there in the unmanifested, in the background, in the space consciousness. So these are beautiful pointers that there is in you object consciousness, which is thought, which is mental images. Anything that has form is object consciousness. For most humans, all they ever experience in their life is object consciousness. Their entire life experience consists of a succession of arising and subsiding objects. And they try to hang on to a bundle of mental objects that they think, that's me. Mental images, names, labels, what they think of me, or has been taught to think of who they are. But what are all these things? They are thought forms that you hang on to, and that's me, and it consists of mental objects, many of which are the mental counterpart of material objects or material achievements. So there's the shiny, new, flashy car, which in itself, of course, is not important because it's going to rust. In a few years it'll be gone. And all it can do is take you from A to B. It's nice, yes, we can appreciate these things. But if they become an object, then a mental form arises, which is not just car, it's my car. My is the important thing, because then the thought object of car becomes invested with a sense of self. It's not just a car. I relate to it. I'm looking for myself in it. So the mind object, the thought object car, becomes very important to me. And if somebody scratches your car, or even dents it accidentally, it feels, if you identify with that as my car, it feels you are being injured personally. And anger arises because somebody is attacking you. Or let them say that somebody says, well, this may be a nice car, but my uncle has one that's much bigger than yours. Can't be. And you feel diminished in your sense of self. That's how people play their ego games. One little ego tries to diminish another little ego by claiming that my uncle has something bigger than you. I don't have it, but it's enough, it's my uncle. So there's some association. Because it's so it's an indirect thing that I can identify with. Of course it's absurd and funny, but a lot of human interaction works in that way. And so you identify with you may then identify with other things that are a little bit more subtle. Other people's opinion of you, which becomes also a mental image. Knowledge, acquired knowledge. A certain skill that you have. You may be extremely good at hitting a ball. It's a great thing. If you're a master at hitting a ball one way or another, then probably in that field of activity, if you're truly a master, you're probably present, at least during that time when you're hitting that ball, when you're playing the game, when you're in the zone, you're not thinking, you're not planning, there's no decision making. Right action happens every moment, and there's a power, and then people love to watch you. But then what happens when you stop playing the game? You re-enter the normal state of consciousness, and then you identify with that skill. It becomes a mind object. You are better at it than anybody else, and the world is telling you that. So that is something also, and then somebody else suddenly comes who is even better than you, and they chuck you out. You're no longer captain of the team or whatever it is. Oh no. And that's very painful when a mind object, something you had identified with, is taken away, dissolves. Great loss, great pain. So most humans only know themselves as object in the realm of object consciousness. Such a pity when there is so much more to human life. There's an entire realm that's always been there, and humans just haven't looked at it. They've been so seduced by the world of objects, both the external objects in their world as well as the inner objects in their mind. They've been so seduced by the world of objects, so fascinated by objects, so completely identified with the things of this world, that they forgot that there is an entirely different other dimension to their being than that, which has never gone away. The great thing is that you cannot destroy space consciousness. You can ignore it. You cannot know that it's there underneath the accumulated object consciousness. Yes, but it is there. You cannot even in the most obsessed person, obsessed with thinking, and you see, it's not a moment of continuously one next thing and the next thing, one damn thing after another. Churchill's definition of history, one damn thing after another. But we could also define the human mind as that. It comes one thing after another. And never aware that there is this vast realm within them that would free them from dependency on the world of things, which includes their mind, because it's object consciousness. That vast realm is there and they never know it. It's like the example of like a beggar sitting, trying to get a few cents from someone who's going to give, and he's been sitting on a box filled with gold. I gave that example at the beginning of the book. He's been sitting on this box filled with gold, but he's never looked. He's only looked out there. Or we could say a more modern version of that. He's been sitting there and never realized that he has a bank account in Switzerland, and that has $100 million in it, and he wants. Now, this is a somewhat deficient parable, because even if the beggar had a bank account in Switzerland with $1 million in it, wouldn't really make that much difference to his life, because it's so much deeper than that. But it's a parable for people who can think you've already gone beyond it, but I put it at the beginning of the book because most people know only the realm of objects. So a box full of gold works as a metaphor for a while, but it's not ultimately the right metaphor, because it's so much greater than any entire gold in the world. And so that space consciousness is in you, has never gone away, but been ignored. The peace, the stillness. And I'm presenting here, apart from the fact, which is more important, that as we sit here, it arises from within you, even if you didn't want it. But I'm also pointing out little entry points into it. We've already seen bringing a yes to the present moment is an entry point when you accept the form. Form is a thing, is an object. When you accept the form that this moment takes as something that happens, or an inner form, an emotion that arises, when you do not resist the form that arises, and the normal state of consciousness is almost continuous denial or resistance of the form, because you want another one in the next moment, a better one, a different one, a more fulfilling one, not this form of the present moment. I want a different form. And if I don't have it, at least I can think about it, so I don't have to look at this. I imagine the next moment is going to be better than this one. It won't if you haven't fully acknowledged this one. So, when you accept the form that this moment takes, that is the miracle. The form of this moment becomes an opening into the formless within you. And the worse, the more challenging the form that this moment is, and you accept it, the deeper it takes you into the unconditioned space consciousness, or into peace. So if you were faced with a dreadful disaster in your life, it arises at this moment. Everything has collapsed. And you face it and see that the isness of this moment just is as it is. You look death in the face. You accept the form that this moment takes completely. And suddenly you sense something that cannot really be described. It's a spaciousness or peace around that dreadful event. It happens within a field of peace or space. And I wouldn't use here the word happy. You're not happy when that happens, nor are you unhappy. It is beyond happiness and unhappiness. There's a serenity and a peace that come. But you can experience even with little things. Surrender to a little thing, a little form that this moment takes, a little challenge, and you find a little peace. Oh, nice. You surrender to the cold soup that I mentioned yesterday. And you find that the cold soup is giving you a little peace. It's not the soup. It's changed your state of consciousness. It's gone, oh, okay. You make room for it to happen. You allow it to happen. You make space for it to happen. Humans don't make space for things to happen. They want to remove space from things. So now if something is happening and you make space for it, you become the space. So, and this is the grace that is hidden underneath so-called bad events. Now, bad events have a scale of, they start with a cold soup, very little, and go on to some dreadful accident, disaster, imminent death, or everybody around you died, or you lost everything, or somebody tells you you only have 3 more weeks to live. You have the scale. Something dreadful, something so-called bad happens in your life. And then there's a scale. Cold soup is easy, but for some, that's a challenge too. And so for some, it sets the whole pattern. They have a cold soup and the rest of the day is spoiled. They don't make room for events. They don't allow an event to be. They argue with reality. I saw a cartoon once. It's hard to describe, but I'll attempt it. It showed people wearing placards. It's come some kind of protest march. And the placards contained only horizontal lines. And the entire surroundings, the street and the houses, were drawn in vertical lines. So the message is, we are against it. Whatever it is, we are against it. So if you make room for something to be, it can only be this moment because nothing can be apart from the now. You make room for something to be, it already is, so why not allow it? Allow it to be. And this act of allowing, easy to do when you face something beautiful. I allow this beautiful tree with the magnificent colors to be. That's easy. And then you walk one more step and suddenly you sink, your right foot goes right into the mud. Crunch. And there comes a minor challenge. Can you immediately say, oh, it already has happened. It is already. Not much you can do except, of course, pull your foot out and walk on. But usually, of course, it would lead to a reaction. So some words may then come out of your mouth. And maybe there could be an immediate attempt to blame someone. This is what the ego likes to do. Something goes wrong, okay, who can I blame, says the ego. They should have warned people about this. Or if you are in the States, then the favorite thing is go to a lawyer and sue them. So, and this is a beautiful practice. The many things that, in quotation marks, go wrong in your life are actually the greatest things. In a way, even greater than the beautiful trees, because they can take you deeper. And so, to a large extent, the world is here for you to experience things going wrong. And that is the challenge of the world. And if you still think otherwise, you may have lived on this planet for 50, 60 or 70 years and still expect things not to go wrong. Now, the illusion that you can have things not going wrong, you can still live in that illusion if you live in an advanced, industrialized country, perhaps. Travel to India, and you can no longer live in the illusion that things around you are solid and that you are in control. You are not. Nothing that you plan is going to work out. Everything is going to be totally different from the way you expect it. And things will constantly challenge you, forms. And wherever you look, the world is not as solid as it seems to be here. Wherever you go, there are old people, dying people in the street. Are they not? Where are the old and dying people here? I don't see any. They're shut away. We mustn't look. Just pretend that they don't exist. We put them away there. The old go here, and the dying we put them there. And the dead bodies, never look. Must never see a dead. It's very hard, unless you have a very close relative. If you ever want to see a dead body, they won't let you. They say you're mad. But if you are in India, you see dead bodies very easily. It's normal. And so you get a much better sense of the fragile nature of the world of things, objects, and forms. How insubstantial this world actually is. And it's only in the West that you have the illusion that the world of form is very substantial, solid, and it's going to last. It's there. It has a solidity and permanency. It doesn't. And when sometimes a gigantic man-made form collapses, like 2 years ago in New York, that comes as a dreadful shock to people because it looked so solid and it collapsed. So the world of objects isn't as solid as it seems to be. The world of bodies isn't as permanent and solid as it seems to be. It is very, very fragile, fleeting, insubstantial. So if that's all you know, then you are in this fleeting, insubstantial universe, and there's nothing. And of course, there's constant fear when you identify with that. Even though they try to it's very much like the Buddha, because the story goes that he was born into great wealth, and his father did not want him to see that there is poverty, that people grow old, and that people die. So he had already reached fairly advanced age. He was, can't remember, 25, 30, whatever, and wasn't really aware that there's such a thing as ill, old, and dying people. Because he lived in, it seems like almost like the West these days, that's shut away. And one day he saw it. His father didn't want him to see it because it had been predicted he would either become a great king or a great spiritual teacher. And the father didn't want him to become a spiritual teacher. He wanted him to carry on the business of being a king, the family business. And so, but the father had made the biggest mistake he could have made. He waited for so long. When finally he did go out, it was such a shock when he saw that people were lying in the streets dying and ill and old, and he saw dead bodies. He said, "What is this? Does this happen? What happened to this man? He's not moving anymore." He said, "He is dead." Dead? Yes. And that happens to everyone? And what's the point in anything? What's... Oh. And soon later, he left everything behind. In the middle of the night, the story goes, when everybody was asleep, and this is a beautiful metaphor, everybody around him was asleep, and he walked out. If that's all there is, so his search then was for that dimension. Is there something else to life than just that? And it lasted a few years. And he tried all the practices, tried to achieve a state of perfection. He got very good at all the practices, and yet they didn't take him to the realization of space consciousness. And one day he almost starved himself to death when he said, I've had enough. This is my translation of the sutras again. He said, enough is enough. Give me some food. And they brought him some food. Most disciples left him. He said, oh, he's lost his way. He's eating again. And then he ate normally and he sat under a tree. And suddenly something happened. All resistance collapsed. He was no longer looking for anything to happen. There was surrender to what is, not looking for some state anymore. And there it was.